In 1954, a man arrived at a Japanese airport with valid documents, a valid passport, valid stamps. Everything looked normal, but there was something that was off. The country of the passport never existed. It was not a country that changed its name, not a country that disappeared after a war. And according to every map, every official record, and every government database on Earth, the country of the passport simply couldn't be found anywhere. The first thing authorities did was to detain him, investigate him, and then overnight, he was gone. No witnesses, no explanation. This is a very curious story of a mystery that has been retold for decades. And the more people look into it, the stranger it gets. So I decided to make a video about it and talk about the case of the man from Taured. So according to the most popular version of the history, everything began in July of 1954 at Tokyo's Haneda Airport. A businessman arrived after an international flight. Nothing about him seemed unusual at all. He was well-dressed, calm, professional. The exact type of traveler the airport staff saw every day. But this normality changed when they checked his passport. The document identified him as a citizen of a country called Taured. Officials assumed it was a mistake, a translation issue, or some kind of clerical error. But the more they searched through records and maps, the more confused they became. No country called Taured existed. No country called Taured had ever existed before. So they started questioning the traveler. And here's the part that always gets me, because he wasn't confused about his identity. He was confused by them. The man insisted Taured was a real country, that it has existed for centuries, and he couldn't understand why nobody had heard of it. So the officials decided to bring out him a map and ask him to point to his homeland. Without hesitation, he pointed to the region between France and Spain, the small territory that we know today as Andorra. When they explained that the country was called Andorra, the man reportedly became frustrated. He insisted that it had always been called Taured, and that he had traveled internationally for years using the passport with no problems until that day. And it was actually real. The documents seemed to support him. The passport appeared authentic. It contained immigration stamps from multiple countries. He also carried business documents, personal identification, and what appeared to be legitimate corporate records, all referencing the same impossible country. Everything checked out, except the one thing that couldn't. So the authorities were not able to verify his identity, as I said. Authorities continued to keep him under observation while the investigation continued. He was taken to a nearby hotel, and the guards were posted outside his room to resume the investigation in the morning. But when the officials returned the next day, something had happened. The room was completely empty. The guards reported nothing unusual at all, and no one claimed to have seen him leave. His documents, the passport, everything, the business papers, all of it had also disappeared. He was never found after that. For a lot of people, this is the moment where the mystery becomes something else entirely. Because if you stop to think about it, if this story is actually accurate, you're not just looking at a man with a fake passport anymore. You're looking at something that has no clean explanation. The first thing, the man came with a passport with stamps from a country that has never existed and had no records at all, but had been used in other countries because of the validation of the passport. And now the man suddenly disappeared with cops and authorities outside of the hotel room. What could possibly have happened to him? After that, this story became famous, started to spread through books, documentaries, and eventually, when it was created, the internet. A lot of theories started to be created, like parallel universes, time travel, secret government programs, and even reality glitches. Of course, all of that were just some crazy theories of internet, but the case of the men from Taured were one of those cases, those rare cases that feels too strange to be fake, but at the same time too impossible to be real. Eventually, researchers started asking the obvious question: where is the evidence? If a man carrying documents from a non-existent country was detained at a major international airport and then vanished without a trace, that should have generated a paper trail. Some immigration reports, police records, newspaper coverage. Researchers spent years looking, and what they found, or rather, what they couldn't find, changed the entire shape of the mystery. No verified immigration records, no confirmed newspapers articles from 1954, and no official documentation matching the famous version of the story. The earliest known written reference to the man from Taured appears in a 1981 book called The Directory of Possibilities. Before that, there's almost nothing for a case supposedly involving multiple government agencies at a major international airport in 1954. The silence is remarkable, actually. So the question stopped being whether the man came from another dimension, which is a little crazy to think, but the question became whether any of it ever happened at all. And now we're getting to a point of the mystery that is not only about the country that the man supposedly came from, but also who is this person, or who this person was. While searching for the origin of the legend, researchers found something genuinely interesting, a real case with striking similarities. His name was John Allen Cusher Zigris. I don't know if that's how it is spelled, but okay. Unlike the mysterious traveler, Zigris actually shows up in historical records. He was arrested in Japan in the late 50s in connection with fraudulent travel documents. He made claims about his origins that authorities struggled to verify, and some of his documents reference a place called Taured, spelled differently depending on the source but close enough to raise eyebrows. Researchers noticed the similarity immediately. But even with this information, here is where it gets complicated. The documented Zigris case doesn't match the famous legend in most of the important details. There's no strong evidence he vanished from a guarded hotel room, no record of him pointing at Andorra on a map, and no indication that anyone seriously considered a parallel universe explanation at the time. What the record suggests instead is a real criminal case, a conman with forged documents and a talent for invention that may have gradually transformed him into something much larger as it was retold over the decades. By the time the internet got hold of this case, the story had grown into something almost mythological. That's not unusual. Folklore has always worked that way. Real events, strange people, unexplained moments, they get absorbed into the culture and come back out looking completely different. But what is unusual here is how well it worked. Usually, fabricated mysteries like this, invented stories, I'm not saying this one is invented, but usually they don't last long because internet always has a way to identify and try to understand basically everything, or at least almost everything. But this one somehow got more compelling. No one can tell if this is real or not because of the lack of evidence, but the shape of the story is too well built. And even the Zigris page is very short on Wikipedia. Of course there are information, but this mystery is really interesting because of the amount of things inside of it. The Zigris relation with the man from Taured, the similarity between Taured and Taured that I mentioned before, everything that is told in history, and the fact that this case probably happened 70 years ago and no one has a way to prove it, and we can't be sure of how it happened and if it actually happened this way, but we have some info that created the mystery, and now we are talking about it. Because if the man from Taured never existed, then at some point someone invented him, and the story spread so far so convincingly that millions of people today treat it as evidence of parallel universes. Me personally, I don't believe this. I really believe that if it happened, it was only some criminal or normal case of an airport that spread it differently in the internet later. But it raises a question that I can't stop thinking about. How many other mysteries are just really good lies that nobody ever bothered to check? You know? Most researchers now believe the famous legend is almost certainly a heavily exaggerated version of the Zegras case, transformed by decades of retelling into something unrecognizable from the original. But even that conclusion feels incomplete, because the story didn't just survive, it thrived. People choose to believe it, share it, build on it, try to understand it, and think the reason is pretty simple. A solved mystery has an ending, an unsolved one keeps the door open, and this case, it seems that it has much more to talk about itself. The Man from Taured works because it points at something real. The feeling that reality might be slightly less stable than we assume. That somewhere in some record nobody has checked yet, there might be proof of something that we can't explain. Whether the story is true, false, or maybe misunderstood, well, we don't know exactly. I usually don't bring mysterious and this type of cases here, but this one really caught my attention. I will continue with psychology, curiosity, and even these mysterious cases. So if you like the video, comment below so I know you guys liked it, and give me suggestions for the next videos about mysterious and criminal, etc. Any kind of cases that we can talk about here.